Lukuyang sitwasyon. Lalaban ako. Lalaban tayo.
It's official. Vice President Leni Robredo is running for president in 2022. She made a huge announcement this morning, the second to the last day before the deadline for filing of certificates of candidacy.
Hindi lang apelido ng mga nasa poder yung dapat palitan. Yung korupsyon, yung incompetence, yung kawalan ng malasakit, kailangan palitan ng matino at mahusay na pamumuno.
Hashtag Laban Leni 2022 broke Twitter today as Vice President Leni Robredo makes her bid for the top post in the land.
They are all trying to run as outsiders, no, that they're not part of the system, no, because that is the very same narrative that Rodrigo Duterte peddled in 2015.
Tinatawag ko kayo, gisingin ang natutulog pang lakas. Tumindig kayo. Tinitiyak ko, meron ding titindig sa tabi nyo.
So the opposition is fielding its most anticipated candidate through Vice President Leni Robredo. She is vying to be the country's next president. Will the opposition win what many say will be an uphill battle? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5 at kasama ko po sa studio dito sa Mandaluyong, Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Isang araw na lang.
Oo, isang araw na lang. 15 days na lang.
Weekend na. At hindi, isang araw na lang ang filing, COC.
Diba? Tapos noon, mga...
Isang buwan pa.
Isang buwan na lang ang antay natin. So,
mga countdown talaga.
Pero, of course, Ami, siguro naman, headline nyo bukas.
Siyempre, pero bago tayo pumunta doon, pwera pa yon, yung bumagsak nga yung ranking ng Philippines, 121st. At
Polela pa, no?
Oo, ng COVID
Grabe.
recovery index ng Nikkei.
Oo.
Ano.
Eh,
Pero, well, September daw kasi yun. Oo, yun ang sinasabi ng DOH. So, ibang-iba raw ang sitwasyon noon. Yun naman.
Na natin by October.
Pero kahit pa paano, that's really bad timing for the administration. Di ba? Kanina,
It is.
sinabi ng DOH, timing lang yan, but they were referring to, as you said, that was a snapshot of September nung nag-surge. Pero timing-wise for politics, this really creates a very big backdrop against which Leni Robredo announced her candidacy.
Tapos yun pang away nga ng alam naman natin, yung tuloy-tuloy na away ng Malacanang saka Senate. Particular, no? Hindi ko.
Yeah.
Pero as usual, di ba, yung details medyo intriguing, di ba? Unang-una, color pink, not yellow, wala ka nakitang nakadilaw kanina.
Yun nga
di ba?
eh.
At
Sabi ko nga, akin yung tanong na yun eh. Sabi ko sa
Pero
guest natin.
papasok na natin ang gets natin.
Oo.
Teka po, may isa pa, bago natin ipasok ang guest natin, may isa pang mahiwagang tanong. Where is Sara Duterte?
Ano na naman siya?
Anong sabi mo?
Where
Wednesday.
is Sara Duterte?
Sara
Ah,
Duterte, sinabi niya na no, she's not running for president.
She's
But that was
running,
as of last
diba?
night.
Yeah,
In politics,
said,
one
she's
day
bakit
is a
may bago
lifetime.
ka bang balita?
Ba, nasa Maynila ba siya? Nandito ba siya?
Well, ito may nakita kanina sa Makapagal, yung pala look-alike.
Nagpapapicture daw yung mga tao sa kanya.
Ano ba?
Seryoso, may look-alike.
Kaya kung meron pong naka-spot dyan kay Sara Duterte dito sa Manila, sabihin niyo lang po kami.
Yeah.
Because in all seriousness, it's a very real question.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of talk kasi, still a lot of talk pa lang that the president might file a COC for mayor of Davao City.
Sino?
The president.
Paano yun?
All it takes is for him to fly to
So,
Davao. Kaya bantayan bukas kung
Depende
nasaan
lahat siyang
sino.
kesa.
Hindi, pero dapat si Sara mag-decide no? Kung anong gagawin niya.
Well,
Hindi siya mapasunod
So depending kung
presidente.
if the president is in Davao, where would Sara be? If she's in Manila, then that tells you something then. But
sige,
if she's in Davao, then that also tells you something.
Isa-isahin natin yung mga nagdesisyon. Basta aantayin natin yung desisyon ni Sara Duterte, pero sa ngayon, today, the big story, of course, was Vice President Leni Robredo.
Yes, that decision was the big story today.
And so let's begin tonight with somebody who has been, on the one hand, holding back on the news. At the same time, the people around him have also been calling this na dito rin pupunta. Let's begin tonight with Isang Bayan convener, retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Justice Carpio, welcome to the Chiefs.
Again.
Good evening, Lucy.
Good evening, Justice.
Ed and Roby, good evening to all of you.
Sir, let me ask, beyond what already happened today, if you don't mind, we want to ask kaagad what comes next, particularly when it comes to the main objective of Isang Bayan, having a united opposition, having a united slate. What comes next?
Well, the next step is for the lineup of Lenny to be completed, especially the senatorial lineup, and that will be completed, I think, in the next few days. Of course, the unity talks will continue, but of course, it's now getting harder and harder to unify the everybody. But we take comfort in the very warm reception by the public of Lenny's declaration that she was running.
Yeah, but is this why, actually I don't know what the update is now, is this why, I think this is say, when she filed, walang vice president na kandidato?
Well, I think
Wala,
she's already a vice president. Kiko Pangilinan, the LP president, is running for vice.
Okay.
And sir, we
So
already
that's
have
a
5
short
names.
thing, no? We're just waiting for the actual filing of Kiko.
Okay, so confirm
Yeah.
yan.
That's why I
And-
said the next step is for us to complete the Senate slate.
Okay.
And we will do that in the next few days.
Well, sir, hanggang bukas na lang, sir, yung filing.
bukas
Pero
na
sir,
lang, sir,
we
ang
already have
filing
5
nyo.
names.
Yeah.
We already have 5 names, 2 from the LP and 3 as guest candidates. Teddy Bagilat, Laila de Lima for the LP, Chel Jokno, Rizon Tiberos, and Antonio Trillanes as guest candidates. Sino pa hong kinoconsider na ipasok?
Well, most of them have filed already. They're filing regardless of whether they are part of our slate. So it's a matter for us to pick up, to choose
I see.
who will be with our slate. They will
Who
all
will
be
you?
filing.
Okay. So it's just a matter of submitting the endorsed candidates
Yes,
list.
it's a matter of
Okay.
endorsing them.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask you exactly how the journey went, because in as little as 2 weeks ago, there really wasn't anything certain about VP Lenny running. Anong naging trigger nung decision? What made it finally, a very concrete move, no? And she came out, all guns blazing today, I have to say. So, yeah.
Well, I think early on she already said that she will run if only to prevent another 6 years of Duterte's and also to prevent the return of the Marcoses. She said that. So that was my cue to come to the realization that she is serious. Because, of course, the Dutertes will always try to hold on to power. And we know that Bongbong Marcos will run because it's his last chance.
So it was when Bongbong filed or declared, that was when she actually decided, eto na, I'll go for it na. Ganun ba yun?
No, from my point of view, when she said that I'm willing to run just to stop another 6 years of the Duterte administration and to stop the Marcoses from returning, I said, then from my conclusion, she's going to run. I mean, I don't know if that was a trigger, but from my perception, I think that was the moment when she decided, when I think she would run already.
Justice, one aspect of her filing of candidacy today was the colors. She wore, no? She was wearing blue and she was adorned with pink. And the groups that were urging her to run were tying pink ribbons as well. Should we read anything into that? Because of course, what is notable is the absence of the color yellow. Should
Well,
we read anything into the colors?
I'm sorry, but I really don't know the reason. Maybe we're running out of colors. And
Kami rin, sir. We're running out of colors to wear on air.
Oh.
You want
Oh, tingnan niyo si Ami, ang daming kulay. Talagang umiwas sa pink, ang daming kulay, pero wala pa rin pink.
you have to wear your
Napaisip
pink
ako eh.
clothes.
So hindi siya deliberate justice not to veer away from the associations with the yellow opposition. Is there a unifying message there or something like that?
Well, that could be part of it. But of course, she's entitled to have her own emblems, her own signals to the public. And I think if you use red, that is already part of the KBL. I mean, if you use yellow, that's already the Aquino. So she's entitled to her own color also.
Pero sir, I think hindi naman surprising that she filed for the presidency. I think what surprised most people, most of all, was the fact that she filed as an independent and not even as LP, of which she is chairperson. And I think that's significant for a lot of people. Let me ask you po, were you aware of this? Was this part of a decision or a plan? And was there agreement or disagreement as far as that was concerned?
Well, I was not aware of that, although I remember her telling me that if she runs, she would want to run under the coalition, under the Sambayan coalition. That was what she said. That's all. She did not say that she will not run under the Liberal Party or any other party. But that's what I remembered, what she told us, that if I run, I will run under the coalition.
I mean, Justice, speaking of the coalition, how would you gauge your role now? Your objectives have not changed, but how would you gauge the nature of Isambayan as a coalition now? And for that matter, the coalition's relationship with all the other people who are still in the running, including Isko Moreno and Manny Pacquiao?
Well, the coalition will, of course, campaign for our candidates, our unit, Lenny Robredo and the rest of the lineup. And we will have our own political machinery, campaign machinery, separate from the campaign machineries of the political parties that are part of the coalition. So we will be campaigning for the entire slate, for the entire coalition. The political parties will be campaigning for their candidates in the coalition. That's how we plan to do it. And we're talking about that already.
Yeah, but does that mean that you formally then shift to, as you said, a campaign machinery specifically for Lenny Robredo, shifting away from your original mandate of trying to bridge and trying to keep the communication lines open between all non-Duterte candidates?
Well, that will always remain because we still have until November 15, and even beyond that, candidates can always withdraw. But we cannot delay anymore. We have to organize already. And those who have filed, it will be difficult for them to withdraw because they have already committed to their supporters. So we will be assuming that they will continue. But we will not be delayed by any hope of unity. We will now start to organize for the campaign.
What might be a critical factor for withdrawing candidacies? Would surveys be a critical factor? Because that's what the camp of Mayor Isko Moreno said today. Because there was a hashtag, the Isko Moreno withdraw in favor of VP Robredo. And his camp, hindi naman siya nagsabi. His camp said, bakit kami mag-withdraw, siya yung mataas sa survey? Is this an important factor in decisions like this? The situation is very fluid for both the administration and the opposition.
Yes, if you go back to history, Ping Lacson withdrew because he was rating poorly in the surveys. So it's a factor, of course. But historically, the surveys at this time of the year are not reflective of the actual results of the election. All those who were leading at this time of the year lost, in fact, in the actual elections. So the surveys that matter are the surveys starting February or March.
The actual campaign.
Yes, because things could change. Like, for example, when the surveys were taken, Lenny had not yet declared, and we had not yet endorsed her. So when you declare, when you get endorsed, you get a bump.
Sir, what's the game plan? What's the game plan now? I mean, yes, you have 8 months or so before actual vote casting. I suppose you've discussed this among yourselves. Now, how do you get better numbers as you go along before May?
Well, we are organizing chapters in all provinces. We hope to have a chapter in every in every town and city. We have over 40 chapters now in the Philippines, and outside we have more than 20. That's aside from the members of our coalition. These are chapters of Isang Bayan. So we have to organize this because these are the, we will get the warm bodies during election day to watch the polls. This is the purpose of these chapters. So one of the purposes, of course, they will also be campaigning. Of course, we all know that this will be a different kind of campaign because there will be no physical campaigning practically. The battle will be waged in social media. So we have to prepare for our digital warriors also.
Justice,
So how do you view
Isang Bayan...
how do you view the landscape right now in terms of her competitors? And how do you propose to organize yourself in a way that will position her ahead of those competitors?
Well, I've seen a recent survey, and it shows that she is actually there in the top 4, and they are quite close. So,
Actually, number 6 siya in the last Pulse Asia survey. And so right now she's trailing, but I'm not talking about surveys, but as far as what you know about the platforms, for example, and the political positioning of her competitors, for instance, where do you think she would gain the most in terms, for example, of the demographics and the support that you will probably need in order for her to win?
well, if you look at the recent registrations in the COMELEC, the youth have massively registered. They lined up as early as 1 o'clock in the morning. And I think there will be, if all of them can register, that's about easily about 10 to 12 million votes. New registrants, and normally these new registrants will vote for change. These are the first-time voters. So there will be a tsunami of first-time voters in May 2022, and we expect these first-time voters to be voting against the administration.
Yes, but to that point, if there are going to be at least 2 candidates not allied or perceived to be not allied with the administration, and on the other hand, Bongbong Marcos just came out today and said that, I mean, which is actually true. As of now, he said, I am the lone administration candidate. If it was just one candidate on the administration side, can the opposition, however you define it, come out victorious with anyone if there's more than one candidate on the other side?
If there are 3 strong candidates, 1 administration and 2 opposition, I think the administration candidate can still lose because that's not difficult mathematically. If you look at the votes of the Marcoses, historically they have hovered at 20% in all the elections. They have not gone beyond the 20+ % mark. So if it's a 3-way contest, they will lose.
Okay.
Just sorry, go ahead.
Justice, there are some analysts who are saying that both Bongbong Marcos and VP Robredo are polarizing in this country because she represents what they describe as pure opposition, and of course Bongbong represents the other side. What do you say to these observations? And they're saying that this will make the candidates that position themselves in the middle, like Senator Lacson and Mayor Isko, as the stronger candidates. What do you say to these observations?
Well, that is the theory of some of the strategists, but I think when the issue is good or evil, it's better for the forces of good if you can really make a clear divide, because it's easier to decide on which side you will vote, no? So if we can make it a binary contest, if you position yourself in the middle, you get neither of the votes of the forces of good and the forces of the evil. So that assessment may not be correct if you try to put yourself in the middle.
Pero,
When
sir-
the
Yes,
when
sir.
the issues are so completely opposite, no?
Pero sir, all
Very
parties,
clearly.
all parties project themselves as good. No candidate will ever, I mean, whether you're in the middle or left or right, you will present yourself as good and sell yourself as good. So, in
Well,
the end po,
because there has been analysts who said that you position yourself in the middle so that you can get from both sides. My argument is that if you position yourself in the middle, you will not get from either side. It can work also the other way around.
Yeah. Justice, could you give us an
then,
idea
I
on...
mean, that's it. Sorry.
Justice, could you give us an idea of how everything is organized on the side of Leni Robredo's campaign? Because I know a lot of people who support her, but even among a lot of her supporters, a lot of them are really wringing their hands and they just want to shout, don't mess this up. They remember the debacle of Ocho Derecho. They are no fans of how campaigns of the opposition have been run in the past 6 years. So just between the Liberal Party, Isang Bayan, and whatever support group Vice President Robredo has organized around her personally, where does the campaign manager, for example, reside? Liberal Party, Isang Bayan, is that directly reporting to her? What's the organization here?
Well, that's why we have formed the coalition, the broadest coalition since 1986, precisely because of the lessons of the last senatorial elections. If you limit yourself to your own group, then you limit the votes that you can get. No? So we have a coalition from the left to the right and everything in between. We have religious groups, we have urban poor farmers, and we have managed to keep together this coalition. And I think that is the key to get everybody to create a big tent for your candidate.
But yes, sir. But does that mean one campaign team, one campaign manager, ultimately accountable for Vice President Leni Robredo's campaign? And does that mean that that campaign manager is with Isang Bayan, essentially?
Well, as I said, we will have our own campaign machinery for the entire coalition, but the members of the coalition have their own candidates, and of course, you cannot stop them from having their own political machinery,
Right.
but you will have to coordinate. There has to be coordination, and the coordination will, I think, will not be difficult because this will be waged in the social media, and you can just meet together to plan out your strategy.
Sir, what about since you've already confirmed that it's Kiko Pangilinan who will be running as the vice president candidate of VP, what contribution do you think will a Kiko Pangilinan for VP make to the campaign of VP Leni for president? And what was the process of selection there? Or was that purely the choice of VP Leni?
Well, we, of course, in the Isang Bayan, we had our internal survey, and for vice president, there was only one person who qualified, because to participate in our internal survey, you have to accept the Isang Bayan process. That means that you accept our decision. and there was only one guy, that was Senator Sonny Trillanes. So that's the name what we submitted to VP Lenny. And she processed that. Of course, she talked to the Liberal Party, to the other people. And at the end of the day, they decided to put up Kiko Pangilinan, and Sonny Trillanes accepted to run for the Senate. And that's how it happened. I was not privy to the discussions, really.
Justice, have you completely written off the Dutertes as contenders, Sara for president and the president for vice president? Because they have until November 15 to change their minds. I know that Mayor Sara said yesterday, tweeted yesterday, no, count me out, I am not running for president. But have you completely ruled them out?
And it's still possible that Sara will run for president or even vice president, and President Duterte will run for mayor of Davao. It's still possible. Anything can still happen.
And you will consider Sara a strong rival, of course.
Yes, the surveys right now show that she is leading, or maybe number 2. But as I said, the surveys now are not really indicative. But yes, she's a strong contender as of now.
Justice, you mentioned a while ago that social media is going to be the main battleground in the campaign for 2022. But, as of now, the field is dominated pa rin by other political personalities. In fact, when you look at social media, I think Ms. Robredo is one of the most demonized on social media. You can lump her together with Bongbong Marcos and President Duterte, pero she's one of the most demonized. In fact, ang sabi nga ni Antonio Contreras, DLG professor, in their survey, they asked respondents kung sino ang kandidatong hindi nila iboboto, at number 1 lumabas si Leni Robredo. How are you going to address that problem on social media exactly? And you have 8 months for that.
Well, actually, the sentiment in social media is changing. It's now going against Duterte and his party because
what's
of
the basis for
harmony,
saying
because
that?
of the economy, because of the management of the pandemic. So people's idea, people's thinking is changing.
Yeah.
And of course, we know that Duterte has the biggest army of trolls in social media, and you have to take that with a grain of salt. No? What is mentioned in social media.
Justice, for the past months and for the past years, President Duterte has really been, Teflon, di ba? Talagang kahit anong ibato sa kanya, ang taas ng rankings. And I think a lot of people were really surprised by the latest survey that you're referring to, I believe, yung talagang double-digit drops in approval ratings for many areas, except probably fighting crime. But grades for corruption went down, grades for handling the pandemic went down double digits. What do you think led to that? I think even a lot of critics were taken aback by just how dramatic those drops were.
Well, from my point of view, it's been a long time coming. The pandemic, of course, showed all the defects of the administration, their management, their procurement of supplies and medicine, the corruption in the procurement system. It all showed, and the response to the pandemic by having the longest lockdown in the world devastated our economy. So I think it's all taking a toll on his popularity. It's normal.
Justice, Senator Manny Pacquiao is also bent on running. You think he will eat into the votes of the opposition or the administration?
Well, in Mindanao, he will take votes away from Sara Duterte if Sara Duterte runs, definitely. Now, in Luzon and in Visayas, he could be taking votes from both sides.
Both sides.
But how do you plan to push Lenny in Mindanao, where her votes seem to be the lowest?
Well, of course, we just have to campaign harder there in social media, and I think if you see the drop of Sara Duterte, she dropped most in Mindanao. I think the people there their eyes have been opened to what is actually happening, because they feel hunger, they feel unemployment, they feel rising prices, and they feel the breakdown of law and order. There are a lot of robberies now. So I think that has eroded tremendously on the capital of the Dutertes.
In the unity efforts, would it be possible for any of these candidates that you have been talking to run as the VP of Leni Robredo, and you will change your VP candidate?
Well, it's possible. Anything is possible. There can be mergers. I do not rule that out. But as I said, once you file your certificate of candidacy, there's a lot of investment there on your part and in the part of your supporters. It's more difficult now to unite, but it can still happen.
Justice, of course, everybody will give it to you today. Today is the moment for Leni Robredo. Kanina, in-interview ko si Brother Armin Luistro sa The Big Story. Hindi mabura yung ngiti sa mukha eh. Talaga kita mo. And so this is really practically a euphoric day for supporters of Leni Robredo today. But it's a long campaign. As one of the conveners, what would you caution your own campaign? Na there are a few mistakes that I would warn everybody, let's not make this mistake. If you could pinpoint one or two mistakes that you would caution your own people against, what would that be?
Well, they call something like an echo chamber. We should not be preaching to ourselves. We have to expand, we have to go out, and the pandemic has made that very difficult. So we just have to invent new ways of reaching out to the voters. And these are the class D and E, basically.
What will be the priorities of President Leni Robredo? Day one, what will be her priorities?
Well, of course, the economy is a big problem. Carl Chua of NEDA said that we will not go back to pre-pandemic levels in the next 10 years. Can you just imagine that? We cannot go back in the next 10 years to pre-pandemic levels. So we have to attend to the economy, because if the economy does not recover, you can just imagine hunger, unemployment, and a lot of, there will be a breakdown in law and order, a lot of people robbing other people. So I think the economy will be a big, will have to be attended urgently.
And what about what she's going to do with President Duterte when President Duterte is not anymore in power and she is?
Well, she will follow, I think, the rule of law.
Okay. Justice, the last
Sir,
time...
don't you want to be a bit more specific there?
Oo nga. Sige, push it.
In other words, let me put it this way, sir. Is VP Robredo looking at possible charges against the president if she wins?
Well, we have the prosecutory arms of the government. You have basically the ombudsman. The ombudsman, if is an independent body, so if the ombudsman finds probable cause, then he should file.
How does the ICC process work? I mean, I know we keep saying that it also hinges on willingness and ability to actually prosecute here in the country. But how would a Robredo administration approach that demonstration of prosecution. I imagine that she is supportive of the ICC, but when it comes to proving willingness and capability to prosecute any case for that matter, wouldn't that be an awkward proposition for a new administration to say that yes, come in, because notwithstanding a new administration, there remains that question of willingness and capability. Wouldn't a new administration precisely have the same message, ironically, as the current administration, that we are willing and we do have the capability to handle this on our own?
Well, the Supreme Court has answered that. The Supreme Court said that the Philippines is obliged to cooperate with the ICC because the crime took place when we were still a party of the ICC. And therefore, ICC has jurisdiction, and we should cooperate because our duty to cooperate during that period for crimes committed during that period continue. That's one. Second, I think there will be a move to rejoin the ICC once there's a new administration.
Okay.
You mean, sir, you talked about it, and she committed to do that, to rejoin the ICC?
Well, I said there will be a move. Of course, to join the ICC, you need the act of the president and the consent of the Senate to ratify the treaty.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But at the very least, from the level of the executive, of course, in the end, it's the executive that pushes a treaty forward and asks the Senate to ratify it. Is that something that was discussed already in the event that
Well,
she
that
wins?
has not been discussed yet, but personally, I think we should rejoin the ICC. That's my personal position.
Okay.
Will Isang also have some involvement in local races? Will you be supporting some local candidates?
We have decided that we will not be supporting local candidates. We will only support a slate that include from the president to the senators, because we are a broad coalition and we cannot possibly mediate or force our coalition members to agree at the local level. It's very difficult.
Yeah. But Justice, just leads me to one final question. I know we're running out of time. But the last time Leni Robredo ran, in this case for Vice President, she keeps pointing out, mas mababa pa nga ako sa survey noon tas nanalo pa rin ako. But one thing, of course, is most important. She was running as an administration candidate then, with all the resources attendant to that, and the machinery for that matter. Given how you would position, especially vis-a-vis local races as well, and the symbiotic relationship between national candidates and local candidates, how would you gauge first the machinery of Isang Bayan right now, how it will evolve, and then second question, resource-wise, where are you now?
Well, first of all, we have the biggest coalition since 1986. We have a lot of Class D and E in our coalition. Urban poor, fisher folk, farmers, peasants, laborers. So we have a big base of Class D and E. And also in local elections, in provincial elections, normally the barangay captain would tell his people, this is the sample ballot, but as long as you vote for the local that I want, it's up to you to vote for the national. That's normally the case. So especially for the president, Filipino voters want to vote for the president that they choose personally. That's been the historical record. So you may be very strong, your machinery may be very strong at the local level, and that machinery can elect local officials. But at the national level, especially the presidency, the voters would normally vote according to their own preference. Now, as to financial resources, the big businessmen have told us that if you have a viable candidate, then we will pour our support, pour resources into your candidate, because we cannot stand another 6 years of the Duterte administration.
Okay. Retired Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio of Isang Bayan. Sir, maraming salamat for joining us tonight at ingat po.
Thank you,
Maraming
Justice.
Maraming salamat po.
Sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you also.
We will just go into a break, so please stay with us. Welcome back to the Chiefs here on One News, and now joining us is Dr. Sharon Del Mendo, Professor of English at St. John Fisher College in New York. Good evening, Dr. Del Mendo, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Well, we are aware that there have been a lot of literature about U.S. Army nurses who were captured when Bataan and Corregidor surrendered in World War II. But not much has ever been written about Filipino nurses. And I understand that that has been the focus of your research. Can you tell us why you decided to focus on that?
Well, I've done a lot of archival research on the Philippine Commonwealth structure and how it limited and formed Philippine-American relations up to the end of the Commonwealth and then conferral of formal independence. And part of that was doing archival research on the Philippine campaign. And I did research on the medical care that was available during the campaign and after the surrender.
And
Professor,
okay, go ahead, Ami.
Professor, you think the omission was deliberate? Because I've read a lot of our history books as well and accounts on Bataan, and I know I haven't come across, I haven't seen any mention of the nurses, Filipino nurses as well. You think it was deliberate?
I don't know if it was deliberate. In my interpretation of the documents and oral histories available, I think that it was partially racist and partially inflected by colonial mentalities, the little brown brother syndrome.
But what have you, I mean, tell us about your research and tell our audience about your research. What are the compelling insights that you gained that a lot of people, even Filipinos, most likely are not aware of?
Yeah, the Filipino nurses, there were about 25 or 30 of them as compared to about 50 American nurses, that is USAFFE, so that's United States Allied Armed Forces of the Far East. And we don't know for sure if the Filipina nurses were actually inducted into USAFFE. If they were, that would make them officially doing military service, and they would be eligible for recognition.
Yeah.
As veterans.
What we do know, yes, and veterans, what we do know is that there were these Filipino nurses who served heroically on Bataan. The conditions were extremely hard. Every 80% of them got malaria. This is not just the nurses, but also the soldiers. 80% of them got malaria. By March of 42, the nurses were caring for patients in hospital number 2 on Bataan, which stretched over 2.5 miles through open jungle. So there were no roofs over the patients. And by March of 42, the 78 combined nurses, USA and Filipina, were caring for roughly over 1,000 patients per day, each one.
And this was
Right.
before the surrender. I
Yes.
suppose a lot of people are curious after the surrender, especially. There was a lot of cruelty against Filipino and American soldiers. What about nurses and Filipino nurses in particular?
Well, one of the really shocking and important points, I think, of this history is right when the surrender happened, the fall of Bataan. The American military gave orders that all of the American nurses from Bataan would be evacuated to Corregidor. And Captain Josie Nesbitt, who was one of the American nurses there, said, "What about the Filipino nurses?" And Colonel Gillespie said, "Only the Americans were ordered to evacuate." And Josie Nesbitt said, "If the Filipinos aren't going, I'm not going." And so the Filipino nurses were evacuated to Corregidor along with the Americans. But if Josie Nesbitt hadn't stood up for them, they would have just been left with all of their patients who were surrendered to the Japanese.
And as far as your research is concerned, I mean, does the story end there? I mean, do you get to follow what actually happened to these nurses, either as a group or individually?
We only know a little bit about the Filipino nurses after the war. All of the nurses were surrendered at the fall of Corregidor, of course. And the Americans and Filipinos, I have read, were sent to Santo Tomas, to the civilian internment camp there. But Filipinos were not interned at Santo Tomas. So presumably the Filipinos were released after they were processed in whatever way nurses were processed, or people incoming to Santo Tomas were processed. We do know that during the occupation, while the American nurses were interned at Santo Tomas, that the Filipinos brought them anything they could: money, cosmetics, food, anything that they could bring. And by the end of the occupation, people were dying every day in Santo Tomas of malnutrition and or diseases brought on by malnutrition, such as beriberi, or dysentery was a perpetual problem. So while the American nurses were interned, the Filipinas rendered as much aid as they could. And the minute Santo Tomas was liberated, the Filipino nurses came in and celebrated with the Americans. So there was really a very strong relationship between the Americans and the Filipinos. And yet, the Filipinos are not recognized.
Yeah.
What's
Ironically,
the educational? Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead, Lucy.
No, I'm just curious, ma'am. What was the educational background of the Filipino nurses at that time? Did they really take those 4-year courses? Was there a licensure already for nurses like they do now? Did they have to have extensive experience in order to serve in the war? I just wonder how their skill sets were at that time.
Well, we have a letter from Josie Nesbitt, the same one who insisted that the Filipina nurses be evacuated to Corregidor. And she made a list of all the Filipino nurses who served on Bataan and Corregidor. And it is an immensely important document because she sent it to another colonel to be sent to Douglas MacArthur. And the letter says, we should recognize these nurses. They served as heroically as we did. And most importantly, it gives a list of names and also where these Filipinas were at the beginning of the war on December 8th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked military installations on Luzon. So we know that
Yes.
they were mostly at Fort McKinley and Fort Stotzenburg, or they joined on after December 8th. So one of the things is that MacArthur sent out a general call for help, for enlistment, right? And anybody who wanted to help fight the Japanese could enlist immediately in the Philippines. And so all of the nurses that are listed on Nesbitt's list as joined after December 8th, 1941, I am assuming that they joined through that general call. But the problem is we don't yet, or at least I haven't found yet, the documentation that proves that. So I'm working with a group of Filipino-American leaders and nursing, the PNAA, the Philippine Nurses Association of America, to get the authoritative documentation that would allow us to officially recognize the Filipinas as doing military service.
Yeah.
If we can do that, then they are eligible for official recognition by the United States government.
Yes. And that would really be wonderful, Professor Del Mendo, except that, ironically, even if the nurses could be recognized in the same way that Filipino guerrillas, and I think at that time they were called scouts, even if Filipino scout, if they were put in the same boat, well, it just puts them in the same boat. And the reality is, even with the initial recognition, Filipino veterans who eventually made it to the United States are a very, very small fraction of those who were recognized. And even when they got the United States, I believe a rescission act during the time of Ronald Reagan actually took away most of the benefits that they were entitled to. Given that, plus do the math, the age of these women, if they're still alive, really leads us down a sad ending for most, if not all. But given your work here, when you say recognition, what other values and meaning and justice can we get out of any other definition of recognition?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are two things. Number one, if you go to the historical park on Corregidor, it's that day you take the fast ferry from Manila, and there's what's left of the military installation on Corregidor has been made into a historical park, a museum. You can go through the Malinta Tunnel. And somewhere in that historical park, I can't remember exactly where, there is a monument, quote unquote, to the angels. And it lists every single American nurse. And then at the bottom of the monument, it says, "We acknowledge with deep appreciation the 20 Philippine nurses who assisted their American friends in both the hospitals of Bataan and Corregidor. There was a job well done. They were a credit to the United States and the Republic of the Philippines." So the monument that currently exists on Corregidor itemizes each American nurse and then just throws in this global statement like, oh yeah, and by the way, the Filipinas helped too. So one concrete thing, and one of the things that I would really like to see happen, is to have a new monument set next to the old one. That lists the Filipinas, and we know who they are and how many of them there were because of Josie Nesbitt's letter. So that's one thing that we could do. So that people who go to Corregidor and do the history tour get that part of the story. The other thing is that if you can prove that a family member was with the USA FFE or a recognized guerrilla group, and there's a lot of controversy about who gets recognized as a guerrilla, right? But my own Lolo, Dominador del Mendo, is listed in the official guerrilla roster of Mas Bateño guerrillas, right? So if you can find that kind of documentation, you can apply for a Congressional Gold Medal, which I am in the process of doing for my lolo. So even if these nurses have passed away, their descendants would be, we think, would be eligible to apply for a Congressional Gold Medal on behalf of their family member who served on Bataan and Corregidor. So it's not money, it's not citizenship, it's not perhaps what we would think of as being justice, but it means a lot to my family to have a medal to recognize my lolo.
Yeah.
And I think it would matter to a lot of Filipino families if they could have the same. And also just to be recognized at Corregidor.
Yeah.
How long would that process of recognition take usually? It will have to go to your Congress, right?
I don't know. I'm in the process of connecting with the people who are actually sort of officially and legally in charge of the Corregidor National Park. So that's one thing. We have to see who has the authority to allow, for instance, a monument to the Filipinos to be erected. It doesn't seem to be the National Historical Commission of the Philippines.
Professor Del Mendo, we're almost out of time, but I can just clarify. These are 20 names, as you said. And if we could just speak their names, that's recognition enough? 20 names?
No, we have to take Nesbitt's list of names and then find documentation that will qualify them as being part of the war effort.
No, but I mean, my point is, do we have those names with you? Do you have those names now?
Yes, I do.
We only have a minute. Professor Del Mendo, speak their names.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, we've got Amelia. This is such a small picture. Sorry. Gloria Espinosa, Socorro Basan, Ana L. Cayan, Benilda Castañeda, Maureen Davis, Lucilia Barrera, Paula Badano, Luis Cruz, Felicima Chan, Cleopatra Dalai, Hermania, I don't know, I can't read her last name because the quality of the document is not good. Celestina Go, Floromina Gasayan, Adalelia Garcia, Frederica Garcia, Sagang Silang, we can't read the last name, Genova Lara, Sostina Lorenzana, Lida Macas, Esperanza Ona, Anita Prefetant, I think, Perfecta Quintes, Juana Benada, Caridad Singson, Pura Santa Maria, Rebecca Salvacion, Catalina Tolentino, Marina Villanueva, and Esperanza Valido.
It's 29.
Hey, I have a relative there, a Cruz.
You might. That's the other thing that needs to be documented is the descent line. Diba?
Right. Dr. Sharon Del Mendo, thank you very much.
Thank
you,
you.
ma'am.
very
You
much. It's an
honor
honor
our
to be here.
frontliners.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your work.
That will be all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines, and Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Luchi Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.